What's up, guys? It is the Break Room Podcast. You got Vin and myself here. I'm fucking super hyped. We're going to be talking House of the Dragon on HBO. It's coming up. Game of Thrones. We've been fucking dying. I've personally been fucking dying on the inside, waiting to talk about this topic for the longest fucking time. We've spoken a lot
I know it's
about
been killing you.
wrestling. We've been speaking a lot about fucking Pokemon. We've been speaking about a lot of other things besides the thing that is nearest and dearest to my heart, which is we were just talking about before we started the show. What do we even call it now? Do we call it Game of Thrones? Are people just gonna call it House of the Dragon? You know, A Song of Ice and Fire. Whatever it is that's going on in George R. Martin's fucking masturbatory fantasy. We're gonna be talking about it today. I'm fucking pumped.
Hell
What about
yes.
you, man?
I'm hyped, man. You know, we always talk about this no matter what anyway. This is like a regular topic of conversation for me and you.
Oh yeah.
And of course, we've always enjoyed quoting, looking back on the best parts of Game of Thrones and enjoying what there was to enjoy because it was so much. And I look back fondly, on Game of Thrones and all the great times we had getting together. Making sure we booked Sunday night to all come together if we could and watch the episode. And then Mondays were, Game of Thrones Fallout Day. We would, everybody who didn't read the books would be completely like, what the fuck was that? What? I can't believe it. Oh my God, what happened? And myself and Chris, we read ahead, read the books. Chris really read the books. Listen to the
we'll
books
talk about
multiple times. We can talk about that.
Well,
But
so
yeah,
you
I'm hyped.
mentioned
I'm
it.
hyped.
You mentioned it, man. Game of Thrones is, I think, the only show apart from The Sopranos, which we weren't even friends then because we're fucking talking the late '90s, early 2000s. Game of Thrones is the only show that we all got together to watch together as friends. We get super stoned, we get super hyped. The fucking song comes on. The fucking
Seven blunts for seven kingdoms.
Seven blunts for
Boom,
seven
boom,
blunts
boom,
for
boom,
seven
boom, boom, boom.
kingdoms. Man, and I miss that, and it all just came fucking hurtling down with that last season, which we already know. If you go back and watch the old episodes, we've talked about the fucking final season ad nauseum. We know you guys fucking hated it. All right, we have varying opinions. There's things we agree on, but we're not gonna fucking get bogged down talking about the final season of Game of Thrones.
Yes.
We're not gonna let fucking Benioff and Weiss fucking wipe their dicks on this fucking topic and ruin this for me anymore. We're gonna expound on Game of Thrones. We're gonna talk theories. We're gonna go deep today. So man. I mean, let's talk about. I was gonna say, let's talk about how we got introduced to Game of Thrones and how it all started for us. I'll start, man.
What was your intro? Who did it? Who did it to you?
Well, so I wasn't gonna watch it. Game of Thrones was one of those shows where oh hey, watch the show. Yeah, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
When people tell you, hey, just watch the show, and yeah, all right, and then you don't. And I always
remember. Wait, was this season 1 had already been done?
Yeah, what happened was, and I always loved Skyrim. I didn't really know what Game of Thrones was about, but my two friends, it was Yao and Ant, pretty much forced me at Yao's house to watch. Friend of the show, Mike Yao, forced me to watch Game of Thrones, and I sat there and I watched it, and I immediately was just mesmerized and fell in love with just everything from the very start. It starts strong with them north of the wall and the White Walkers and just the guy being a pissant.
Sharp ass dialogue. I always felt like that was one of the things that really draws you into. It's of course the scenery and the action and all the cool shit, but I think early on especially the dialogue was so tight and the interactions were so compelling because like you're saying, one guy was acting like a fucking pissant little shit and you're like, what's with this asshole?
Yeah.
Really
well, and also they didn't shy away. It starts violently, which actually gets me to buy in because I'm like, oh, okay, this is for adults. And that's the thing too. We've mentioned it before, or I've mentioned it before, but yeah, the scenery. A lot of these other shows, they're not on site. We already got it. We got how far into the episode? Oh, we're 6 minutes in. The Butcher's Boy. The Butcher's Boy. You ran him down. There's a lot of
stank a Butcher's Boy for weeks.
Shut up, fucked up bloody.
At least I'd have one happy memory. This could just evolve into quoting the show.
Yeah, we could just keep quoting the comments. We want to hear your favorite quotes from Game of Thrones. But yeah, they were on site. They were in Iceland. They were in the fucking desert shooting these scenes.
Croatia and all these beautiful historic places.
And it was just so beautiful, and I think that's kind of lost on a lot of stuff nowadays. Like, I love Mando, I love the Star Wars stuff, but they're filming in front of these screens, and that's great because they could do a lot with that, and they're not killing their actors. But on the flip side, I feel like you kind of lose something. There's no other show out there that is filming. I don't know how many different crews they had. You could look at how many crews was it? They had like 2 or 3 crews filming.
I think they had 3 simultaneous crews that were the size of what a movie would be doing, but like 3 different ones.
Right.
You know what I mean? Simultaneously. It was just like, it was the most incredible, complicated production I think Phil actually, Finn, friend of the show, has said before, it'll just never be done again. It'll never be done again. Like, it's just not, considering the technology and everything going on now, it would be very rare for that to, something like this to appear again. But I guess we have to see what they just did for this show. House of the Dragons looks equally as stunning, and I'm sure they're aware that now, because of the last season and because of kind of the murky ending, it's like they really got to come out firing on all cylinders. So I would be very surprised if we didn't see some of these great exotic locations. Definitely, we're not going to be north of the Wall. We're not going to be in some. I don't expect it.
There's not a lot of fighting in the plot. Yeah, there's not a lot going on up there.
Yeah. Okay. So in the north, it's going to be just less up in that territory. But yeah, that was the thing that really pulled you in. It was definitely the locations, the scene, like the dialogue, the scenery. You were just like, what is this? And the violence and the adult nature, like you said, like I was very hesitant because it looked like Lord of the Rings, and I'm not a big Lord of the Rings guy, so
right.
I was kind of like,
Well, that was the thing is, I expected it to be more like, ooh, flickety florf, like this flowery kind of medieval kind of bullshit thine, and there's a little bit of that, but they did a good job at not making it too much, not leaning too much into that old English kind of fantasy. They made it a bit more real feeling. And yeah, man, I just fell in love with the show. I mean, I ended up watching the first 2 seasons, and that was all that was out. And I could not wait to find out what was going to happen next. So I got the books, and I remember reading those books for I don't know, it felt like a year. Just reading every day, going home. And I'm not like a heavy reader. I really like audio books, podcasts. But I read it, man, and it was absolutely amazing. I remember staying up all night under my blankets in my room, watching it on like a shitty Kindle Fire tablet, because that's what I had at the time, and just watching it fucking straight through and
obsessively.
Man, it was so good. And then I went through all the books, and that was what was cool. Was like, I want to give you time to answer this too, but that was what was cool. Was it was a unique time where the books outpaced the show. And we were in like a position of like power. We were like gatekeepers to help tell the story of Game of Thrones because, and also I should add too, when I was watching it with Mike, they were like explaining to me what was going on. And I think that helps, it's very hard to get into in the beginning. It's hard to follow, but when you have somebody there saying like, okay, this family, they're from here, this is their deal. It kind of helped me. And yeah, it was great because we knew what was going to happen. Because the books outpaced the show for years. We knew what was going to happen. Man, watching the Red Wedding happen and just being in the room with everybody else who didn't know, who didn't read the books, and you're like, yep, here they go. They're about to see it.
I do remember that feeling.
It was such a unique time, and what was so cool about it, too, was now, like, we know the story of Game of Thrones. We know the plot, at least the TV show. We'll see when the books come out, but... there was a time where like we were able to have theories like, oh, maybe this guy lived or maybe, this happened. We were able to like have theories and like postulate online in forums and talk about it. And like learn all these little things. I mean, that's where we learned R plus L equals J. and that was like the big secret for so many years was Jon Snow's parents.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just obviously super enthused about this.
It's a big part of our lives and our fandom and all that. So it's really great that it's coming back like this.
How did you get into it?
So that's funny. So I actually remember seeing the promos for this show because I was a big HBO fan. I would watch The Wire, Sopranos, all those shows back in the day. So Oz. I remember the lightning bolt promo. It was like different people transitioning, and they were sitting on the Iron Throne, and it was Sean Bean. I remember recognizing Sean Bean sitting there, and I was like, I don't know, medieval, whatever. It was very nondescript. It didn't have any kind of trailer that would show you what was going to actually happen in the show. It was a very just like it tried to gain interest. So I wasn't into it, but I remember coming home. The first episode had come out, and I'm trying to think if the second one was already out, but I'm pretty sure it was just the first episode. My cousin was living with me at the time, and
little Joe was always talking about it.
So yeah, Joe, I came home from work one day, and Joe, I guess, just finished watching it, and he just turned to me and was like, "You have to watch this fucking show. You have to watch it." And I was just like, "All right, yeah, all right, if you say so. Like, let me just wind down. I'll do my thing." And I really feel like it must have been the first episode because Joe wouldn't have let a week go by to even recommend the show. It wouldn't have even been that long. So came home, watched the episode, and fucking Bran gets put at first. Yes, to your point, hard to follow. Stark and this king is
lots
visiting.
Of names,
just like holy, there's a tree and there's all this. It's serious. It has a tone. It's pretty serious. There's wolves. Like okay, like cool. The guy gets his head chopped off in the first thing, so they got you in there. And then it ends with Bran getting pushed out the window. And you just saw a 10-year-old kid get pushed out a window by a guy who was banging, I guess, his sister. Really couldn't even put that together. It was like,
if you weren't drawn in by that, like by that point, that drew everybody in.
There was no way around it. You were just that was the hook, and you were just like, oh, did he just fall out the window? Did that really just happen? And they were always so good about that. There would always be a nice cliffhanger where you really had to watch the next episode to know the fallout and understand what just happened, if it happened at all. I remember Ned Stark's head getting chopped off and being like, no fucking way. That didn't happen. That's a dream or a fucking this or that. Maybe he didn't cut it off. I was so...
It changed storytelling forever.
Yeah.
I mean, what other show does that? Ever? I mean, you don't see that where the main character is killed off. It doesn't happen. Now, it's interesting how, like, over time... mindsets have shifted where they're like, oh, nobody died, like really nobody died. It's like they almost expect
things to hear that.
Yeah, exactly. People expect now main characters to die when that was never a thing. It was always they were seemingly invincible throughout all of this, and
100%.
Yeah, mindset really shifted over time. You know what really actually pulled me in, like when I started being like, oh, what the fuck, was when Daenerys was there with her brother Viserys, and he's like looking at her naked. You're like, what the fuck, man? And obviously,
so awkward.
She's slamming. All due respect, she's absolutely gorgeous. And you're like, okay, lots of nudity and all that. But then when he's like, I'd let their whole tribe fuck you, all 10,000 Dothraki and their horses. You're like, whoa, this guy's a real piece of shit, slimeball cocksucker. And those were like
also. I think of Tyrion. I think of Tyrion's introduction. Man. Just him and Jaime walking in the room, and you know the meaning of a closed door in a whorehouse. What does he say? Wait, how's that go? You'll teach me, no doubt.
Should I explain the meaning of a closed door in a whorehouse, brother? Something along the lines of that. You have much to teach me, no doubt.
That's Peter Dinklage is just a huge part of that show and a huge reason why I love that show. So yeah, Joe introed me to the whole thing, so he gets the credit for being the guy that absolutely was like, you have to watch this. I would not steer you wrong. I would never tell you to watch it if it wasn't great.
Yeah.
And then my buddy Eric, I think he was gifted the first 3 books in like a set, and he let me borrow the first one, but for some reason because I had already watched the first season like ad nauseum, I'm a rewatcher. I watch shit, I'll rewatch it again. I'll watch it before the next episode comes out, so I got like a nice, whatever cadence into the next episode. So I watched that first season probably 10 or 15 times.
Yeah.
Before the second season came out. And I couldn't read the book because the book was like almost page for page what was the show for the most part.
We'll talk about those divergences in a bit. Yeah.
Exactly. It was a great reflection of what happened in the book. Very condensed, and there's clearly missing pieces, but it was, for the most part, the same thing. So I just couldn't get into it for that reason. So eventually I skipped to the second book, and I was just shot out of a cannon because it was just, in that second book, everything's happening so fast because of Ned, and I believe it's the War of the Five Kings. Is that the second book?
Yes.
Yeah. I forgot what the book is actually called right now, but
it wasn't. It became the War of the Five Kings later because initially it was Stark, Lannister, and Baratheon, and then eventually in like season 3 or something or 4, that's when Balon Greyjoy got involved. So that was another king, and then Renly. Well, Renly was in the beginning too in book 2. So you never read book 1?
So no, I went back and read book 1.
Okay.
Now later, because it was basically 2 through 5, like as fast as I could, but bearable. It was tough. Like those are big books. Eventually, you get bogged down. A little time goes by. So I want to say it took me like a year or 2 to actually read all of the books. But I was definitely at that point where it was like, holy shit, Jon Snow's fucking dead, and what's gonna happen? Like probably for 3 or 4 years, I felt like we were reading Watchers on the Wall, like really trying to dive in, watching those great videos. I forgot the kid on YouTube that did those.
There was Alt Shift X. There was a time we didn't know if Jon was gonna come back. I mean, it was a theory. It was Jon's gonna be revived. It was like a thing for so many years. Now we know it. We take that for advantage. A couple of things. I do want to acknowledge some of the comments, but I want to ask first. So you read it on paper book?
Yes, paper book. I have the hardcover. I bought the hardcover copies of these books, not even the soft bullshitty ones that I did with Harry Potter.
Do you prefer paper, like physical books?
I wanted to have these books. That was part of it. I felt like that was just the fact of like the lore of the Game of Thrones and how it is. I just felt like this was the right book to have on paper, hard covered, and also hardcover is a larger, kind of easier to read because it's spaced a little better. So
see, I'm more of an ebook guy. I like reading on a screen, holding one thing.
This is before. This is like the iPad was still those things were, I want to say, kind of like newish at the time.
So I read it on like a Kindle or like a
having an iBook was a new thing. That was definitely Kindle was but I like having the physical copy of specifically this. Other things I do audiobooks for everything.
Sure.
Like, everything now is audiobook, but anyway, so
the reason I'm asking though is because there's some people who are like aggressively, I need to read a physical paper book. I like the smell of it. I can't read an ebook.
It's tactile. It's a thing. It's hard though. I gotta say, reading a physical fucking book, you want to change.
You need to have both hands on it. Yeah, exactly.
I'd almost need to be sitting like this to do it, but you're in bed. You're reading at night. You're reading it in awkward positions, and I would always have to find a way to do it. So that
you let go of it closes. Well, I just want to add the reason I think what helped me in reading it as an ebook. One, I get migraines. I would read it with a black background and white text, so it was easier on the eyes. It was easy to read at night. But what's really great about when you're reading an ebook is you can tap and highlight on a word and it'll define it for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vocabulary I had no idea, like what a trebuchet was, a trebuchet, or a ballista, or just certain medieval terms that you wouldn't know of, but you're able to kind of highlight, and it'll immediately define it for you, and you're not left confused having to go to a dictionary or just kind of keep moving and figure it out by context.
Definitely a lot of advantages. There were definitely, especially over the years, there's a lot of cool Harry Potter digital books they came out with.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so still with the origin story with like Game of Thrones, the fact that it became another Sopranos night at the house, because then it became everybody come to my house. My house was always a good spot to hang out, big TV, all that. So we'd be able to smoke weed and watch a show at the same time. So that's a big draw. yeah, so there'd be anywhere from like 5 to 10 people always at the house. Every chair full, watching, and I was like laser focused, like as loud as anybody could take it, kind of volume.
Yeah.
No speaking. Like, please don't speak this whole
time. Shut
time.
the fuck up.
I would be like the whole episode, and then it would end. We would immediately dive in. It would be like, holy shit, and yeah, to the point of like having read ahead. I would always keep my mouth shut. I wouldn't even try to make a face or make a big, can't wait to this episode. But I wouldn't say shit. I would just pretend like I knew nothing. And then when the episode would end, it would become like, well, fucking, is this that? Blah, 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 blah. Did that just really happen? Or, so it was always a lot of fun kind of hosting those events. Food, weed, drinks. It was always,
I miss those days.
It was always a good time. Yeah, it was, now it's
those
like
were the days.
COVID years. Those were... When we went through the Riverlands, 7 blunts for 7 kingdoms with Dr. Shane.
7 blunts. So let's go to the comments here. Adam AK says, I remember Penn Station being lined with Game of Thrones artwork that first caught my attention, and then Vin came in with the HBO hookup for me to watch every season. Which
I was no problem with that.
We were all sharing HBO. That was
my HBO Go.
Yeah. That was,
you gotta watch it. I don't care what it takes. Watch it. Take my password. I'll just as long as you watch this show, I'll be happy.
We became evangelists. We would like go up to people like, have you heard the good word? Like, have you heard the good word of Game of Thrones? I would just
Did you read the
insist.
books?
Yeah.
You found another book reader?
Oh, you got to read the books, and we'll.
Oh yeah, that was always kind of like good times.
No, you know what though? Let's talk about that because we're talking about books here too. And also to that point, Phil Dunphy says physical books for me, screens make my eyes cross. And From the Dungeon agrees. He says so true, Philip. Yeah, see, that's why I brought that up though, is because that becomes like almost like a heated, contentious thing for nerds. Of like, no, I would never read an ebook, or no, I would, in my case, I would never read a physical book. But there was always a lot of shitting on the book readers. Like, oh, okay, you read the book, shut the fuck up. It's not as good as the show.
There's a pretentiousness.
But you know what? We're the only ones that are left now. Now that this final season of Game of Thrones came out and everybody pissed all over it, the book fans are all that remain.
Listen, I hold it personally that I went along with the show episodes, waiting a year for the fucking show to come out. Watching the episodes, we fucking waited for this for 8 years, and then it ended not up to our expectations. People who just jumped in the last year, or the last year and a half, or last 2 years, and they just were able to fire through everything, and then they were like, "This show sucks," and I was just like, "You really don't understand the heartbreak that I feel because of how much how along for the ride I've been." And also that the books are unfinished, so we're kind of sitting hung with this like lack of closure from my perspective. You're like, all right, they didn't end the show great. Okay, where's the next book? Where's the final 2 books allegedly? So it does leave a bad taste in my mouth when people who were able to watch it like right away, never read the books, are like, sucks. I'm just like, all right, can't really talk.
Yeah, and we do intend to talk about House of the Dragon and what's to come, but we can't do that without first kind of dissecting everything. Yeah, how did we get here with Game of Thrones? Fuck. Have
you when was the last time you rewatched the show? If we're gonna transition into
I'll be honest, man. And that's why I think I have like the lightest opinion on that final season is I was always a books guy. The show got me into the books. I would not have read the books if not for the show, and the show was like a whole nother thing. But you were saying before how like book 1 and season 1 were pretty much the same, and they were for a bit. There was small gaps. The first person perspectives, the flashbacks that Ned would have, there were small gaps, but otherwise book 1 and season 1 were very close. Then you had season 2 and book 2, and they were still pretty close, but they started kind of cutting out a few characters here or there, combining people for the convenience of TV audience. Because the reality is they did have to do that. TV audience is stupid. There were people who were watching Game of Thrones for like, it was out for 7 years, and people would still say, oh yeah, my favorite character is the midget. I'm like, how did you not learn his name by now? Out of respect for his character, So you had to dumb things down for TV audiences. But that changed everything. Those little divergences that they took in the beginning, and yeah, over time they just slowly became two different things. It didn't happen immediately. Even season 3, book 3 were very close.
Oh yeah, Red Wedding's identical. Like there's really like
Red Wedding was different. I mean, they stab Rob's wife in the stomach. You know, that was a total shock. They didn't stab her. She wasn't there at all. They fucking stabbed her and the pregnant woman. That was nuts.
She's not there in the book?
In the books, she's Jane Westerling, not this foreign chick. I forget her name in the show. And Rob keeps her at River Run because he knew. Catelyn convinced him. She said, "There's no way that you're going to be able to sit there. I know you can take abuse from Walder Frey, but you have too much of your father in you to sit there and listen to him talk shit about her." And he listened to her and kept her back at River Run, and that becomes a whole subplot later when Jaime goes and kind of takes over River Run.
And just for the audience, for Chris's credibility, if you get in Chris's car at any given point of any given day, there's a 99% chance Game of Thrones is playing through the audio system because he's been listening to it. So yeah, he could quote it like verbatim. Yes, Brad.
Yeah.
It was a warm day down in the
Oh, that's it too, man. I read the books the first time through, and then I ended up getting the audio books. So you asked before, how often or when the last time was that I rewatched Game of Thrones. I am constantly. I've lost count now. I remember I used to count like I've gone through it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. It's has to be hundreds of times that I've re-listened to the audiobooks for A Song of Ice and Fire. And even now, like when I go to bed every day, I'll go to sleep and it's a random chapter. I'll wake up and it's a random chapter. And I'm brought right back to that place. It helps me wake up and fucking drive to work and not want to fucking blow my brains out on the way to work because I can listen to the story and no matter where I am at any point, just by listening, it's like I can see everything. So I've always been the books kind of guy, specifically the audio books. Roy Dotrice, his voice is amazing. I've heard that man's voice.
Game of Thrones.
He did make it in. He was a pyromancer Halen or whatever.
We do not deal in shit.
We're not dealing pig shit. He's so good. His voice acting is phenomenal. Like even when he does women now, it's the character for me. So yeah, man.
Song of Ice and Fire.
I've heard that man's voice more than I've heard my own mother's at this point. More speech has been taken, of that man's voice than anybody's.
So,
but I've watched the show recently.
You have watched it recently. I did rewatch it.
Random episodes I'll rewatch just for the hell of it, and it takes me back.
Pick and choose. I felt the need to go all the way back and start from the beginning, kind of as, a warm-up, a re-entry into the universe of Game of Thrones, because regardless of the ending, I enjoy that universe. If there's all these different universes and Marvel and Star Wars, like Game of Thrones, Westeros, it deserves to be expanded on. There's so many great stories, Sir Duncan the Tall and Egg, and all these great things we're about to see. Like there's so much more than just the story of the Starks versus the Lannisters.
It's a universe.
Definitely, it is a large universe that deserves the expansion, and it was just kind of mishandled. So yeah, I went back, rewatched before they came out with it in 4K because they just relaunched it on HBO Max as a 4K stream. So I want to check that out again. But so I rewatched it. The same things stick out, you know what I mean? But now enough time has gone by where I know what to expect and I understand, what's going to happen. So there's still great moments in the show. And it really just highlighted the fact that when I rewatched it, I knew I wanted to go back there again. And I was really hoping that, all right, whatever the missteps were in this, like now we have a finished story coming. We have the House of the Dragon. It comes from a book series that's complete, right? It's 2 or 3 books. I don't know if it's really one.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Let's transition into it. Tell me
about
this.
As my hunger for Game of Thrones became insatiable, I remember hearing like, oh, there's actually it was the Tales of Dunk and Egg, and they were novellas. And specifically, they were 3 different stories that you had to buy a book, which was like a compilation of all these different authors and all these different stories. And this was just one story within this book of, this medley or whatever. So there were
a story about a boy who hated stories.
I know a story about a boy who hated stories. So I bought all of those compilation books to read these chapters about Dunk and Egg. That was one thing. And then, like, several years later, kind of only more recently, he had 2 stories which are about the Dance of the Dragons. They were called The Rogue Prince, which is about Damon Targaryen, who's going to be a main character of this show. And, it's really all the characters, but it's the start of House of the Dragon. And then there was part 2, which was... It was in a book compilation called Dangerous Women, and it was called, like, The Princess and the Queen, the story of the blacks versus the greens. And it was part 2 of this story. And these audiobooks, by the way, were narrated by Ian Glenn, who plays Ser Jorah Mormont. And he does a great job narrating the books. So they existed as their own stories, and then they re-released these in a book recently, which was... what's the name of the most recent book series? Was it House of the Dragon? I feel like it might have been called House of the Dragon, or it was Fire and Blood. That's the name of the newer books. So you can read this story in Fire and Blood. There's also an encyclopedia that I have somewhere over here. Let me dig it out. I'm gonna pull a Rob and pull something off the shelf. You know, all my books fell. This right here.
I was gonna. It's so funny. I fucking thought right before we went live, I was gonna run upstairs and grab mine and put it behind me. But
beautiful, amazing book, tons of fucking pictures, and it's like, I guess you could say it's like the equivalent of like the Silmarillion or whatever the fuck it's called, Lord of the Rings. It's like an encyclopedic history, and that's where it gets deeper and deeper now. It's like you're going totally into the history of the North and all the different kingdoms. So
not only that, great illustrations in that book. That book has excellent illustrations that I actually saw were used in an upcoming animated series of Game of Thrones that's coming out. And I feel like that actually is probably the best way to tell some of those stories. Yeah. Even Dunk and Egg, I would accept as like anime. I don't need like everything to be live action. I feel like there's certain things that happen in Game of Thrones that, or in the we're gonna have to come up with like what do you call this? I think they're calling it the Game of Thrones universe in a way, like that.
I feel like it was always a Song of Ice and Fire, but I think that's just too long.
And that's specific to like what we're reading. That's from the moment Jon Arryn is killed until Bran's ascension. That's like a Song of Ice and Fire, right?
I guess you could say that is a song of, because Ice and Fire, it's Jon and Daenerys, is how I take it, or Jon in general. Yeah, I mean Westeros, people will call it,
Easteros. Anyway,
it'll always just be Game of Thrones, I think. I don't know if that's ever gonna. Yeah,
it'll never change from Game of Thrones. The Game of Thrones makes sense because that even though, and that's the thing about this upcoming show, I feel like there's going to be so many familiar themes to what we've seen in the past that there'll be parallels. There'll be
there's a lot of parallels.
Clear dynamics. Like because power is power, and when power is wielded, it creates all of these things: jealousy, backstabbing. So we're gonna see a lot of characters that I think will feel familiar.
100%.
In their own way.
Almost shamefully, sometimes they borrow.
I
want to go back.
Oh, please.
You mentioned, an anime or an animated Game of Thrones show, and going back to the comments here, Phil had a good point. Was when we were talking about all the constraints they had filming on set. One of the other reasons why they consolidated a lot of the plot points and the show in general, it was watered down a bit, was because they were constrained by a budget. And also reality and physics. Like, it's really fucking hard to make a live action Game of Thrones with dragons and all of this crazy shit happening, you're constrained by a budget. And granted, they got a bigger budget as time went on, but there's a lot of crazy battles that happen in the books that never happen in the show. They just go over them super quick because they didn't have the budget for it. And they saved their budget really for like the Battle of Blackwater. But yeah, they were constrained by that, and they're also constrained by reality. In an animated forum, you could do anything. You could make shadows appear, dragons. You could have all the dire wolves you want. You know, there's 17, I think. I forget how many dragons there are. 14 or 17 dragons in this story. Like, how did they do that CGI wise?
So now they said I did read there's going to be a handful or more in this season. So they are clearly planning more seasons.
Yeah.
And then they said each dragon is actually going to have its own, what they call personality, something that is going to, make each one unique from the other. So that'll be interesting. I'm curious how they use the dragons in the storytelling to actually make it where it's not just, oh, here comes a dragon killing everything. There's got to be, I think, a little bit more substance because of the Targaryen dragon relationship. You'd probably see I did notice actually there, so let's go in. We're gonna see a certain era of the Targaryen family, and this is Damon Targaryen, correct?
This Damon Targaryen is one of them. He's the brother to King Viserys the First.
And King Viserys is the king that is always cut by the throne. Is this the one?
No,
this is not the one. Okay.
Let's put it this way. I'll make it easy for you by just think of a timeline of 300 years. Game of Thrones happens at year 300. Aegon the Conqueror conquering Westeros happens at year 0. Gotcha. This story takes place 100 years into... so it's 200 years before Game of Thrones. It's 100 years into Targaryen rule.
So they're very powerful. They are powerful house.
Oh yeah, this book here tells you you can learn everything about every Targaryen king that sat the throne.
Yes.
Like they all have their own story. Some of them are interesting. Some of them are more like, yeah, this guy really didn't do much. But the story is told for every Targaryen king.
From what I've picked up in the previews, is we're seeing, of course, a problem of succession. Who is gonna succeed the king? And they're trying to name, so the king is tasked with naming his heir, and it's supposed to be his brother, Damon. Okay, so here's what I understand.
Yeah.
But the king wants his firstborn daughter, not his brother, to rule, because he has no sons.
That is all correct. To understand the significance of this ruling, the way that King Viserys' reign begins... before him, you had Jaehaerys the Conciliator, who was known as the Old King, and he was the longest reigning king. He lived till he reigned for like 60 years or something like that. I don't remember. It was a very long time.
It's a big deal because you're saying it's only 100 years, and he's ruled for 60 of them.
He's ruled for most of them. You had Aegon the Conqueror. He had a son, Aenys, who was kind of weak and ineffectual, who was then kind of supplanted by his brother, Maegor the Cruel, who was the third one. Maegor the Cruel was a real piece of shit. He was the one that was cutting himself up on the throne. He built the Red Keep, but he was a sick fuck. He eventually kills himself on the throne, maybe intentionally, maybe not. And Jaehaerys, who was his nephew, who was Aenys' son, takes over the throne. Now, what happens is all of his immediately obvious heirs die. Most of their kids die. So I kind of forget exactly
from the incest.
No, at war, all kinds of different reasons. Some of them were like crazy. Some of the girls, but long story short, the problem in terms of who should succeed him is that he has either, if I remember correctly, it's like he has a daughter who is an older sibling, who had a son, so he has a grandson by way of his older daughter. Or his grandson by way of one of his younger sons. So the question became, do we determine the fate of the throne by birth order? Or can we really let the throne pass through a woman? And that becomes the central thing. And they end up doing a council. It's the Great Council of 101, and they hold a vote for like all the different 7 kingdoms. They all get together to hold a vote, and they pretty much establish that the throne cannot pass through a woman, it cannot pass to a woman, and it cannot pass through a woman. So even if the king has like a daughter, really his brother would end up being his heir. Normally, under normal circumstances.
Under their opinion of how it works.
It establishes this precedent. So King Viserys ascends the throne, and the contestant who didn't take the throne becomes a character later on. He's the Sea Snake's son, who's a significant character in this whole story. Okay. But King Viserys, essentially, he has his brother. He has a wife who's from the Vale. He has a daughter with her, and the wife ends up dying. And it becomes this thing of, okay, well, are you going to remarry? And if you remarry, like, then I guess your son, by your new marriage, will become your heir. His brother, Damon Targaryen, he's a rogue. He's a bit of a badass. He's rough around the edges, and he rubs people the wrong way. And there's a concern from the high towers that and others that the throne can't pass to this guy. He's too unscrupulous. We cannot pass it to him. And what the king ends up doing, and this is probably spoiling a little bit because they're going to show this in the show, but whatever, gotta wet your dick a little bit, right? What ends up happening is the king pretty much says, "My daughter is my heir." And they're like,
they're previewing this. Yes, this is in the available preview. So.
Right, which angers his brother, naturally. And people would say, "What up? What about the council of the ruling of the Great Council of 101?" And he's like, "I don't give a fuck. My daughter is my heir." So there's some kind of contention there, but that's it. He names his daughter his heir. His brother's not happy about it, and he ends up remarrying. And when he remarries this woman, it's a high tower who actually helped take care of his old father, or a grandfather. When he remarries to her, there's an understanding that she's my heir. Like, even if I have sons with you, it doesn't matter. She is my designated heir. And I've been going on for a while already. So to sum it up, he has sons and children with his new wife, and that's where things start to get complicated because he has his daughter, who's his heir of his first wife, but now he has children by his second wife, and over time, his wife, who was like, yeah, sure, whatever, she's your heir. Over time, she's more like, well, he's your son, and the Hightowers, who are a family that were never shown in Game of Thrones really whatsoever.
Not once, never mentioned.
Yeah, Sam goes to the Citadel. The Citadel is at Old Town, where the Hightowers rule, but they never show the Hightower family. And they have like a weird relationship with the Tyrells, who are their overlords, in that they don't necessarily always get involved with whatever the Tyrells are doing, and the Tyrells don't necessarily get involved with whatever they're doing. But they're a grasping family.
That brings up a good question. So in this show, how many familiar families will we be seeing, and how many? Because I know there are ancient families. There are families that go back, Starks. They're just like key families that go all the way back to the beginning, basically.
Oh yeah, that's and families that have since been exterminated.
Completely exterminated. I was gonna say the reigns of Castamere.
Right.
I feel like we're gonna see and hear a few references to some families that will be familiar, but we've never seen before, and then some familiar Stark. I'm assuming we're going to see a Stark at one time or not.
Well, no, not too much. So the predominant families in this are the Targaryens, because it's a Targaryen civil war. So they're very prominently. Most of the characters are Targaryens in some way. You have the Hightowers, who the king remarries to. The other thing too is he had a Hand of the King, who was a Hightower, and he marries his daughter. So it's kind of like he's getting it from his Hand of the King, and he's getting it from his wife. Like, maybe you should name one of your sons. You have the Valerians, who came to Westeros with the Targaryens from Valyria. So that's the Sea Snake. Very badass character. Great, like, not a pirate, but a great captain. The Starks don't really, they're not way too involved. Well,
okay,
because
good. That's probably good for the best.
it's a long way between Winterfell and King's Landing. They one side of the family tries to make alliances with them, so like they go up there, and there's even actually like a subplot maybe that one of the Targaryen sons had like a fling with this girl, one of the Stark daughters, but
always
very little. He comes in, one of the Starks comes in and mops up at the very, 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 very end, and he's a fucking cold, badass motherfucker. But the Starks aren't really involved. Lannisters, they play a small part. There's a guy who is kind of Tywin-like, ends up getting his eyeballs fucking ripped out, but lives.
I'm sure they'll want to avoid a little bit, like too much of that. You know what I mean? They'll probably be happy to introduce some of the newer families and give prominence to the High Towers. And yeah, of course. You know, it's great. I did see. Do you want to hear the thing that I saw today that I kind of almost didn't want to see? I guess it doesn't matter to you.
Before you mention that, just because I want to make sure I get at least some of the main families in. One of the other main families in this is House Strong, who has since been exterminated because they.
Oh, it's so strong.
Oh, that was strong then. Baratheon is a part of it. The Baratheon family, good part of it. But yeah, House Strong controls Harrenhal, and as we all know, Game of Thrones fans and whatnot, that Harrenhal is cursed.
Cursed as hell.
House Strong, so the king's daughter ends up pretty much probably fucking this guy and having bastard children with him that are not legitimate. So the king makes his daughter marry a Valyrian, the one that was actually not chosen as king before him. Try not to confuse people, but the daughter. So one of the plot points that are similar to Game of Thrones is the concept of illegitimate children being born, and it being obvious by looking at them. So in the story, what is always rumored is that the king's daughter, Rhaenyra, she is forced to marry a Valyrian, but he's gay, and she has her own guy that she likes. And long story short, it's rumored that she's been copulating with this guy. I forget his first name, Harwin Strong. And you can tell because the children don't look like silver-haired Targaryens. They have brown hair and dark eyes, so they don't look like Targaryens. And that's what kind of causes the rift between the two sides of the family, is now the king has his children with his wife, and they're saying she's making bastard children. You can't let bastards inherit the throne. And the king does not want to hear that. He doesn't believe in the rumors. So that plot line is very similar in the sense of bastard children who are illegitimate, potentially inheriting the throne. That is a parallel between the two. But what did you see?
I need to recognize though. We got our bud Rob in the chat. Hey, what are you doing there, guy? How's Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania, Rob. That's awesome, dude. You got to go in one of those caves or something, man. Pennsylvania has a ton of caves that you can.
Spree-lunking in Pennsylvania?
I wouldn't spree-lunk, but I'd fucking.
No, so the thing that I saw in the previews, or actually it wasn't. I don't think it's referenced in the video preview. They just showed a few screenshots. So they actually show the dagger, and they say, "Can you imagine the journey that this dagger has had?" And they show.
Talk about the cat's paw dagger.
Yes.
That's sent to cut Bran's throat.
Yes. So the dagger that's referenced early on in season 1, and then eventually is given to Arya and kills the Night King. That's going to be in this show somewhere or another. I was like, oh, okay, nice little callback. So
that's going to be in House of the Dragon. You're saying?
Yes. There's
man, I should have bought that at Medieval Times. Should have got that instead of the Halo sword.
Was that the option there?
It was either the cat's paw dagger or it was the Halo sword, and we went with the Halo sword. It was also much cheaper, the Halo sword, than the fucking Valyrian steel dagger.
Yeah, we got that for Game of Youse.
Rob's he's smoking a J in his cousin's backyard, and he's checking in.
Hey, man.
Appreciate you, buddy.
I'll join you there, pal.
Yeah, we'll definitely let's pack our bowls. But let's go into the comments here. That's interesting though. I love that dagger, dude. So we got a lot of comments here. Let me just see here. From the Dungeon says Game of Thrones never pulled me in like Lord of the Rings did. I mean, I get that. I actually tried to do Lord of the Rings after Game of Thrones, and to me, it was too childish. It was like a bunch of little dwarves come into the guy's house and start like fucking everything up, and there's no curse words.
I wasn't introduced to Game of Thrones like at the right. I'm sorry, I wasn't introduced to Lord of the Rings at the right time.
Right.
I'd say I wasn't a kid. It was something when the Peter Jackson movies came out, really came onto my radar. I didn't have friends that would like tell me about The Hobbit or anything like that. So I didn't really pick up on that. You know, I didn't even really get into like book reading heavy until a friend who I would say it would be weird for this person from what I knew about them to recommend Harry Potter to me. And when I was like 20 years old. And that's what really got me back into like book reading.
Harry Potter's great.
He recommended the book. He gave me the first book. I read it in probably like 3 days. I just annihilated that first book. Obviously, it's for kids, and it was I was so enthralled by it. So shout out to Dan Scott for getting me back into reading.
Dan Scott got you into Harry Potter?
Dan Scott, yeah, that's exactly. Funny. That's what I mean, dude.
Hey man, I did those. The audiobooks for those are great too.
Enjoy them very much. So yeah, really appreciate Danny for that.
Yeah, one day I'll. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the premiere's next Sunday. Yeah, Mike was letting me know.
We do got to get together for that. You know, it's.
I can. Yeah, I'm at a workout on time.
Yeah.
I wanted to try to actually do some kind of reaction. I was hoping we could all do something like this in a way.
Oh my God!
I feel like we'll want to talk.
I might just be emotionally spent after that. I don't know.
It should be. I think it's gonna.
Well, it's tough because we got to give it time for people to see it too. You know, the spoilers. I mean, anybody that's not watching it on Sunday, you're a fool.
So right now it's hard too because you're saying a lot of things. Obviously, even I'm having a hard time keeping up with it, and it's because I don't have faces to the names. You know what I'm saying? But once we get those things, once we really get this, I look at the actors in these trailers, and they're just like top notch. They look really good. They look like some people who I wish were able to be in the first series, Game of Thrones. But obviously, this would attract a lot of like really high end talent. So I think once we're able to put faces to names, all this shit, it'll be way easier.
I think the most, I don't want to say prolific, but one of the most known actors in this is Matt Smith. And I was introduced, who's going to play Damon Targaryen, who is my favorite Targaryen. He's a very badass character. Not who I initially envisioned, but, so total side story. Have you ever seen Doctor Who?
Never watched it, but I know the actor.
It's fucking horrible. It's one of the worst things that I've ever seen. I fucking hate that show. There's actually probably no show I hate more than Doctor Who. Wow. I had an ex-girlfriend who pretty much subjected me to Doctor Who. She was obsessed with it for some stupid fucking reason, and I had to watch the show, and it was fucking awful. And here's the thing: there was sometimes some redeeming moments. There's actually a few Game of Thrones actors in Doctor Who. But Matt Smith, who plays Doctor Who, did do a good job. His acting was good. I hated the show, but he had a charm to him. Then I watched The Crown, which I think is on Netflix, and it's about Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, pretty much.
Yes. Yeah.
And he plays Prince Philip for like 2 seasons and does a phenomenal job. Great actor. So very excited when we're on the topic of the actors to see how Matt Smith pulls off Damon Targaryen. Not who I envisioned, but I think he could pull it off.
To Chris's credit, too, actually, because Chris loves getting credit for things.
Don't we all?
Chris has long been saying that everyone's going to come back and watch this. No matter what we said about the last season of Game of Thrones, Chris would always point out, yeah, but you're going to come back and watch the next thing.
I'd point
and I said,
fucking
well, that's
knife
fucking
at
irrelevant. Them. I said, that's irrelevant, but yes, you're right.
No, it wasn't irrelevant because the whole fucking like mindset of Game of Thrones shifted from, it was Game of Thrones, the greatest thing in the world, to It fucking sucks. It's
the
beyond
worst thing that ever
redemption.
happened.
The books suck now because because Benioff and Weiss fucked up the last season. The books suck now. What the fuck are you talking about, you stupid fucking idiot? You know, and it's like, you know what pisses me off, man? With this, oh my God, I'm gonna start boiling. No, these fucking the same stupid fucking dumb cocksuckers who were saying that Bran was the Night King, the stupidest fucking theory in the fucking world. It was always stupid and never made any fucking sense. Poor fucking just imagination. It was like a toddler wrote it. Those same people complain about the goddamn storytelling in that last season.
It's
but
just
I digress. Everything shifted. And when you say, quote, the franchise is dead, the entire franchise, anything that they do after, no, you know what? I'm not reading the books. I'm not watching whatever show that they come out with. You're full of fucking shit.
If you read the books, you would be anticipating the next book.
Oh my God!
Because we're all sitting on bated breath.
Everyone is gonna watch it.
When it comes out, I feel like, unless it's the worst book ever, I feel like I'll have read it in about a week. It'll probably take 7 to 10 days to fucking read that book. I don't care if it's not 1,200 pages. It's gonna be one of those things that every day, every moment, you're gonna be like, I gotta whatever. Yeah. I'm reading or listening or something because
the book will do its job in redeeming the Game of Thrones territory, but this show will do a good job at redeeming, HBO putting on a phenomenal show in the world of Westeros.
Oh, they have, I don't want to butcher this guy's name, but they brought back the director from Hard Home.
Wasn't it like Miguel Sapochnik or something? Gabriel Sapochnik?
So
I don't know.
Yes, he's directing. They brought back Rwandi for the music. They brought back really key parts of the show, and I think that's why this show will feel familiar. It will be something. It'll hopefully be the best parts of Game of Thrones. That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I mean,
where my expectations go.
They have a Varys-like character. His name is Larys, so you could see that he's obviously very similar. He's like a master of whispers. They actually have a dwarf who is almost like a Tyrion. He's like a clever dwarf, in a sense. His name is Mushroom. And he's like the court jester. He's a main character. This is I haven't seen who's playing him. I don't even know if they're keeping him in the show or not because I haven't seen any dwarf actor or anything about Mushroom. But Mushroom is a central part of this whole story. He's a court jester that's a dwarf, and he's there for everything. And actually, the story is largely told. The written story is largely told partially from a maester's perspective and Mushroom's, and because he's a fool, people just say everything in front of him because they're like, he's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know. So,
I vaguely remember something to that because I had started listening to this book last year. I probably got I'm gonna say a quarter way through it. But yeah, I do remember a jester, court jester. Yep. Everyone would just openly speak. They wouldn't even think twice about it. It'd be like Hodor. Somebody who's just
exactly,
but he knows everything, and he's actually not as
well. I don't know if Hodor does.
No, I'm sorry. This guy, the dwarf.
Yes, the dwarf is definitely very cognizant,
more clever.
Yeah,
I almost want to look it up. I'm kind of looking at the list of people here. You know what we're gonna miss though? We don't have a Carl Tanner. We're gonna have to have.
Listen. So that's what I was gonna say. I lost my train of thought for a second. There's plenty of dead babies in this show. There's definitely children being murdered, so they're not it's definitely gonna be the gloves are off on this one.
They're not gonna hold back. They know this audience is expecting things of the Ned Stark. Like you said, it changed the trajectory of storytelling. So even more, there's gonna be a heightened sense of who's gonna die, who's not lasting, who's the character that's not making it. Maybe that's a good series. Well, can't play that game, but non-book readers could play that game of who's not surviving the first season.
Yeah. I don't know how far back they're going to go and how what I'm really want to see is what the pace of the story is going to be. Cuz it's not told, it's not written like Game of Thrones is or Song of Ice and Fire. It's
it's
a history.
Yeah.
It's like third person
written by a maester.
Exactly. It's an account of history, and they're painting with broader strokes, which is good because the overall plot is totally written out for them, which they didn't have with Game of Thrones. And they're going to be able to fill in a lot of very specific details, which there is some great detail and some great stories in there. But I'm also wondering what the pace is going to be.
George is now seemingly more directly
quite involved. I'm quite involved.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if, you know, you could take the media narrative as one thing where it almost seems like he's distancing himself from the last seasons of Game of Thrones. And I would say all of that is it was as much his responsibility as anybody's to make that show be as good as it could be.
Yeah.
But now it's like a campaign by HBO to say, well, you know, George is now the fucking creative director of this whole thing now. Everything that gets done, which is like important because if anything, he's good at overseeing. Maybe he's not the fastest writer, but he's
in TV. He works in television.
Yes,
and like
that's where he started. That was his before he wrote these books ever. That was where he started. So, yeah, I think now you can have, because it's a complete story. You're not waiting on him to finish it, and it just will feel. You asked about pacing. It should feel right because they know how to pace it from beginning to end. And as long as HBO greenlights the completion of the series, which you'd assume they'd want 5 seasons, that seems to be the new benchmark. 4 or 5. I mean, you could go as long as people want it. How long would you say the story is?
It's tough to say because the way that the whole story is told in the book that I keep pulling up is, it's a continuous Targaryen lineage. So after this whole thing happens, you have Aegon III, who has a whole reign, and he's like this child who is fucked up from everything that happens in this show, pretty much. And his whole reign and everything that happens with him, and then his children. So it's tough to say. I feel like if they wanted to, they could continue it and just continue to show the House of the Dragon. They can, one day they'll go back and maybe they have to do a show on Aegon's conquest. I'm sure they will if they aren't already. But I don't know. You could definitely get several seasons out of it because they can really take the time to fill in those details.
Gotcha.
Oh my God.
A little more first-hand perspective of the events, because you said the books are broad stroke, but now you're going to get into the character's head a little more versus how Game of Thrones was, where in the book you were always in their head. That was where the story was being told.
It's told from the first-person perspective.
Everything they thought, felt, even the things that you as the reader knew that the character you were reading didn't, you're like, oh shit, like they don't know this, there were all those dynamics. That's what makes those books fucking extremely complicated, and I'm sure that's what makes writing those books even harder. Not like, well, here's the events. There was the attack on Winterfell. It was called the Battle of the Bastards. Yada yada yada. It's literally
what is everybody thinking about what's happening?
Yeah. So I could see that's he put himself in a place it's tough, and it became so popular because of the show that he almost got stage fright. It feels like he's just been so almost paralyzed by the expectation, which is understandable because the expectation's fucking so high.
Yeah, I mean, his reaction or response to people who are, screaming at him to finish the books is, it's very, like, I could appreciate it. He said, we're looking at everything from, like, our perspective of time, but this is my magnum opus, and I have to hope that this story is going to survive and continue to be told as long as Lord of the Rings and as long as the Iliad and the Odyssey and all of these other stories that have survived hundreds or thousands of years. So for him, he really wants to make sure that the story is told right. And I mean, my ultimate expectation as far as the books go is Winds of Winter is going to come out. We're going to love it. I don't think A Dream of Spring is ever going to actually come out. A Dream of Spring is like an inside joke almost in the world of Westeros. It means it's never going to happen. They'd be like, oh, we want to do this, but it's a dream for spring. Like Ned Stark said it once in front of Jon.
That's
it's
true.
Like it's a nice to do, but not a need to do thing.
And with him, he always loved to. So he loved to take. He's a big fan of taking what do you call them? Not predictions, but in the story, it would be like what Melisandre would do. You know, she would have this. Oh, this is how these events are going to play out. This prediction, and I don't know why I can't think of what it is.
It's like you end up being right, but not the way that you.
Yes, he
thought.
would love to turn it on you. It would never be what you thought.
Prophecy is a double-edged sword. That's the phrase that they often repeat. They say, prophecy is a double-edged sword, or prophecy is a woman who takes your member in her mouth and then bites your dick off. That's literally a quote from the book, not me.
And if there's anything that this show is, the show all these stories are themed around, it's really like the play for power is always going to be there.
Right.
You know, people want power. However to obtain it, whatever power means to them, they're always reaching for it. They're always conniving for it. They're always positioning and posturing for it. That's in reality, and that's why these books are actually so good, because honestly, our reality has followed some of the weird arcs of like things you never thought would ever happen in our reality have happened.
Right.
And I feel like having known this story, you're like, you need to actually expect the worst case scenario and the least possible thing you think could ever happen to be like the actual through line, because that's if history tells us anything, that's the truth. And his books always reflect history. He's a big fan of history, and he writes all of these things. The Red Wedding, they're all reflections and his interpretations of historic events. So it's like it just what lends itself to these stories being great, and what hooks me in. It's the politic. I love the politic, the violence, and the sex. Like, all right, you know, it's a draw. It's not, you know, oh, cool. But the mind, I feed off of the dialogue, the sharpness, the politicking. I love that whole angle. That's what really drew me into Game of Thrones, and why it's one of my favorites. It's not the fantastical. It's not just the dragons. Cool, like, oh, cool, sick. That's badass. It feels badass. It's very, you know, visually sick. I always read things, and
it's
I said,
the storytelling is.
This. But yes,
those are just aids to good storytelling, which is why everyone hated the last season. To your point, though, about power and how that want for power is always going to be there. It is, but it's not a continuous thing. You know, when you look at history and when you look at the stories in George R.R. Martin's world, it's like a cycle. Power and the want for it, and then everything gets crazy, and then just the utter destruction of everything, and then it like expenses itself. And at the end, it's like people, just like anarchy, you know, they say anarchy is not a form of government. It is a transitionary phase, because at a certain point, people get tired of anarchy. People get tired of just the craziness and want peace and just expense themselves. You know, what happens after great world wars, or in this case, you know, what happens where Daenerys just absolutely fucking destroys everything. The Night King's dead. Everything fucking blows up. And then it's all right, well, now we have to rebuild. And it's almost like a time for peace now. You know, the assholes who were all going crazy for power pretty much all killed themselves or died or gone. And the
so that's the
worthy people are left.
That's the dream of spring. That period of time that we're like in, I guess you'd say, at the ending of Game of Thrones there, that's the dream. And now it brings up the thought of
the Jon Snow show.
This continuation. Yep. Now it's approved. It's like literally something that Kit Harington wanted to put together, brought to George Martin, and then George brought to HBO, and they're like, yep, let's do this. So now we have this continuation, and it begs the question, what the fuck will that bring? What does that mean? What are we going to see that is a continuation of like Game of Thrones? And what is a new story for Aegon? I don't know what he wouldn't ever go by that name. I don't think he would
John?
go by. Yeah, I feel like, how do you, after being
he's Aegon
20, he's Aegon. Not to diverge from House of the Dragons, but it's just in this whole big universe. Like, I'm excited. I'm hoping now that George Martin's more involved. this is an extension of his storytelling. So now like we can actually get like really good, substantial like story.
Yeah, I think you are right in that A Dream of Spring is almost what happens at the end of Game of Thrones, the show, because I do feel like that wasn't actually the end of A Song of Ice and Fire. I feel like that was just the end of Winds of Winter, and it ended.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like
very open. Yeah. I always thought that the finale of Game of Thrones was intentionally. I thought, maybe I'm probably wrong, but it seemed like it was left open because life was supposed to go on. Like there was kind of unresolved things, but that's because okay, we're ending it now, but the world didn't blow up, so there are still things are still moving, things are still happening. And so yeah, I think cuz originally my understanding when he was writing the books is he wanted to actually fast forward 10 years. He wanted to leave one book, I don't know what one, 4 or 5 or whatever, at one point in time, and then the next book was going to be told fucking 10 years later. Somebody's knocking at my door.
You could get every single one of those actors. You could get every single one of those actors back for this, by the way. Somebody at my door? Damn, that's perfect. Anybody in the chat who understands that reference, that one's for you. So I definitely have some big expectations for the show. What is this, Taco Bell? Did Taco Bell arrive, Chris? Watch.
Laundry.
Oh, fucking. Oh, I thought it was the T-Bell.
Missed all that. No, I didn't order T-Bell. I'm fucking starving. Sorry, I missed what you said.
All right, well, no, I was just kind of poking fun at somebody at my door.
Oh yeah, the age.
Well, I was gonna say, we're coming up on a little bit here. We've been talking about this for a while. I wanted to ask to close it out, like, what's your expectation for the show, having read the books, and how do you think this is gonna play out on screen? I don't know. Like, what are your hopes? Let's say, what are your hopes? Never mind expectations.
My hopes are it's gonna be as good as the other show was. That it's gonna be true to the story. That the fan base is going to allow themselves to be receptive to it, and not be vindictive fucking pussy bitches and say I'm not gonna watch it or it sucks, and be hypercritical of it. Let's enjoy the show. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be crazy. Like, I know it's going to be good, and I know it's going to be nuts because I know the stories that are told in it, and all the babies that are killed, and all the fucking, all the crazy warfare. There's so much there for them to work with, and I think now that all of the cast and all of the crew have in their minds that they need to live up to very high expectations, and they need to redeem the whole perception of everything, because of that final season. And it takes some fucking balls to be like, okay, arguably the most toxic fan base that has ever existed, I think, more so than Star Wars, like, very toxic towards... we can't even talk about Game of Thrones. They wiped it off. They fucking snapped it away from existence. If I talk about it, people look at me like I'm fucking crazy now. When it was the greatest fucking thing.
The zeitgeist of
exactly. It was totally... It's a joke. Oh, Game of Thrones was just wiped off the zeitgeist. Exactly. So, yeah, man. I don't know. It's going to be really fucking good. They're aware of the toxic fan base. It takes some balls to say, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna live up to the expectations.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I could ask you the same. Well, I wanted to ask you what your favorite episode was of Game of Thrones. That was one of the things we did say. If you had to, like,
absolutely.
All right, here we do. Let's do this. Who stays? Who goes? It's gonna be hard with just two of us. Episode wise, we get rid of the Battle of the Blackwater.
It's got to only be two things, though. We can only choose. If we actually want to.
The Battle of Blackwater or the Battle of the Bastards. One has to go.
Get rid of one.
Yeah, to just the episode was not as good. Let's.
Two. Those are arguably the two best, aside from like Hard Home. I think Hard Home was probably one of the best episodes.
That would be, yeah, if we had more people.
All right,
We'll
so
save that one for next time. There's plenty of eliminations we can do, but who stays, who goes? Battle of the,
battle.
And I want your opinions in the comments there, Phil and Eric and Yao and Joe, whoever else is still watching.
Yeah, which
if you had to
episodes
get
would you
rid of
guys
one episode, Battle of the Bastards or the Battle of Blackwater.
Oh man! All right, so, oh damn, I'll say Battle of the Blackwater, and there's only just like a couple of reasons. For Battle of the Blackwater, the things that happened in the episode, I didn't want per se. I was rooting for both sides, as a fan, loving Tyrion and loving Davos and Stannis. Like that to me, it's visually and it's such a great move, and I love that move in the book that Tyrion comes up with this whole thing. I love that episode because it's so the chain, he traps the boats into the river, and that's such a great moment. But the payoff at the end of Battle of the Bastards, to watch Ramsay Snow, watch Jon pummel Ramsay Snow in the way that you would want to pummel this character yourself.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give that up. And it was such a visually just stunning, epic fucking battle.
My God.
It just beats, because of when that, Blackwater happens in the series. They don't have the same budget, blah, blah, blah. But again, the payoff for as a fan, as a viewer, as somebody who is just feeling for Sansa and everyone who's victimized by him, that payoff, I couldn't give that up ever. That was one of the best. It was better than Joffrey choking to death. And Joffrey choking to death, I fucking cheered. I literally was pumping my fist at reading it. I couldn't believe it was finally happening. And so I would have to say Battle of Blackwater does go.
You're saying Battle of Blackwater. Yeah, I mean, and the tough part is that it's hard to choose between the two. I should have chose something different because it was totally different budgets. They were working with totally different resources and assets by the time they did Battle of the Bastards. But why Battle of the Bastards is also so close to me and why I'm going to snap Blackwater is that I'm a big fan of history. Love to talk about that sometime, even though most people aren't interested. But Hannibal, who came from Carthage, invaded Rome, whatever year, it was fucking a couple hundred years before Caesar or something. He crossed the Alps, which is an insane feat. And one of the military tactics that he used, I forget the name of the battle right now off the top of my head, was essentially what you do is you have your line here, right? And you have the opposition crash into you. And as they do that, you let the middle collapse and move back. And Hannibal put himself right there as if to tell his troops, like, I'm right with you. Just back away, but don't fucking be cowards. Just move back, right? I'm right there with you. So they invade and they hit into, I think they call it the Bursa movement, the pincer movement. But essentially, while your middle goes in, you encapsulate your enemy like in a circle. And then they have nowhere to go and you just slaughter them. And this is the thing that actually happened in history. I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but they pretty much create like a bag that in their line that the enemies go into, and then they close that bag and kill them. And that was the tactic that Jon developed to defeat the Boltons or whatever, Ramsay's side. But because Jon saw Rickon die and he ran out there and he fucked up everything. He fucked up the entire plan, and they all came running. They saved him. It was the greatest scene ever. They ended up getting caught in the fucking bag. And that's what was happening, was they were all stuck in the middle of that. And that was one of the most amazing battles in history that you could, I wish I fucking remember what it was, but it's Hannibal versus the Romans. Look it up. And they nailed it. Like they nailed exactly what that military maneuver would look like, and the horrendous slaughter and how people are literally getting stepped on. Jon was getting stepped on and just crushed in the tide of bodies. They were just crushing him. And then, of course, Littlefinger and Sansa come and save the day and fucking cut off the bag, and everything's awesome. And everything that happened that you said afterwards. So, yeah, I mean, Battle of the Bastards was an absolute fucking masterpiece. And there's going to be some insane battles in House of the Dragon coming up. So, man, we have some shit to look forward to for sure. Before we tune out, I do want we can go to the comments here, since we have a bunch of people here. So I don't even know where to start. We got a bunch. Phil says, after the last 3 years, we're all bloodthirsty. Eric said, my palate is clean. I had some thyme and some ginger. Talking about the pressure of making the show. Phil says, I don't think the last books will come out until after he passes. This is a whole nother thread that we can open up right now, but if that happens and he passes away, I'm not worried.
He has people that...
He has a team of staff around him that may even know...
Like, they know more than he does because they correct him on his storytelling. They literally have to be, hey, George, so by the way here, this can't happen because of this, and that. And he's just like, oh, shit, okay.
I think the story will be, they'll know the broad strokes. If I'm sure he's told somebody what he wants so that it can be finished if that ever happens. For all the mortality in his world, he has to be cognizant of actual mortality. So I'm sure it'll be in good hands if that happens.
It dies with me.
Joe says, thank the gods for Bessie. And her tits. Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, that's vintage. Man, we didn't do it.
She was one of yours.
Bessie. Joe also said, Phil and Joe both say, fuck the king. Yeah. In the books.
Fuck the city.
Fuck the king's god. Fuck the queen.
Fuck the king.
Yeah.
Bugger. Bugger that.
In the books, he doesn't say fuck. You. In the books, he says bugger. He says, bugger them, bugger you. Fucking hound. Phil says, for me personally, it was the first time when they were like, this is what a show is going to fucking be. Yeah. Blackwater really set the bar, Joe says, which is true. I know Joe loves Blackwater. He's gotten he's definitely taken shrooms and watched Blackwater at least like 3 times. Because you had the wildfire, the green fucking explosions.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was fucking fantastic. It was literally another example of how he was willing to do whatever to the characters, no matter how much you love them or whatever. It wasn't ever about fan service with Martin. It was always what was in service to the story. So
yeah.
And visually, it was just fucking amazing.
From the Dungeon asks, are there wizards in this Game of Thrones? We could ask, is there magic in this Game of Thrones? Is magic a prevalent force?
Subtle magic.
Well,
dead magic.
There's dragons.
Well, there's dragons.
There's dragons, and dragons are powered by magic, ultimately. They allude to that multiple times. They say that magic fuels dragons, so...
In the books, there's the black candles and all that shit where they can talk.
Well, I mean, in Game of Thrones, you have Melisandre birthing shadow babies and, fucking flame and fire. I feel like there really isn't that much magic.
Harry, you're a wizard. No.
There's not a lot of magic in House of the Dragon.
Or Dumbledore.
Yeah, I mean, it's something.
It's not quite that. It's more like religion. It's more like it's subtle. It's a subtle way, and I think that's what actually helps the story too. Like where some people wouldn't really be interested in it if it was presented. It's funny that this show is being presented now as dragons, whereas Game of Thrones was like politic. It wasn't quite all about the fantastical.
Well, it's because like every one of these guys pretty much has a dragon, so it's like you're not just fighting against a person; you're fighting against a person, potentially on dragon. They showed
Damon like hanging out with his dragon, like literally they're just like fucking around doing something. He's like hanging out with him. I was like, oh.
My only concern is that people may criticize this show for being too similar to Game of Thrones in that there's certain plot points that are very similar. The bastard children thing is a big part of it, and that's one thing that may happen is people will say it's similar, but I'm sure they're going to try to find ways to make their mark and make it different too. Shit, man, it's like we could keep talking about Game of Thrones forever, and you know what? It's better that we stop now because we have to save some stuff to talk about later.
Oh, we're gonna be reloaded once we see this episode. I think it's just gonna. Now we're winding down. We're talking about Game of Thrones a lot still, and hopefully my hopes for the show is that it just sets off a whole new. Like, I really want to engage in the story. I want to know what happens next. I want to listen to the book that I have. Like, I'm just hoping it kicks off that passion again, more than just like, oh, Game of Thrones and look how it's similar and oh, this guy's like that guy. I'm hoping they're able to separate it enough where you're like, oh, that's cool, but these characters are clearly different. They're in similar roles and similar positions, but they're just the way they are is obviously different. So
yeah I'm preemptively telling everybody to go fuck themselves right now. So I'm just getting that out of the way. I'm preemptively, for the people that are going to hate on the show and fucking hold up a goddamn magnifying glass to it and like bitch about it and kick their moan through this fucking season of this great show and try to besmirch it and fucking rub shit on its name, I'm preemptively telling you to go fuck yourself. But on that note,
great way to end it.
Appreciate you guys joining us as always. If there's anybody that knows about Game of Thrones, it's Vin and I. We live this shit. We love it. So really looking forward to House of the Dragon. We'll definitely get our reactions. We'll figure out when, because I don't know if it's a good idea to talk about it the day after. We got to give it time. People are going to be angry with us if we spoil anything.
Just don't watch it.
Well, we preemptively told them all to go fuck themselves. So on that note, appreciate you guys for tuning in. We love all you guys, and we'll catch you next time with the rest of the boys on the Break Room Podcast. Like, follow, and subscribe.
Yeah. Do that. Yeah. Whatever that is.
Make sure to do that.
Share it. Tell somebody.